What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I'm making a random video. It is like 12:30 in the morning right now here in Southern California. I know it's late, random video, but look, I had to make this video because I got a question, or not a question, a comment from a fan subscriber now who has been a subscriber for a while. We have a lot of good dialogue, and we definitely share some of the same concerns, but I want to read you his comments really and then read you my response, because I think the conversation is really important and it really gets to some base points. First of all, it's from Michael Lenahan, and he says, it appears that the Dolphins might very well win themselves out of a high position pick for a quarterback. I am with you, Dillon, in that I don't want this team to mortgage away its extra capital and draft picks to move up. They have to fortify both O and D lines in this draft. They will need to keep most of all the extra draft picks to do this right. They need to maximize this draft, not minimize it. Knowing Stephen Ross, he will do what we both don't want him to do. Drafting a quarterback very high is a risky proposition. Look at the teams that have done this and how far it set them back if they didn't get it right. The Browns are actually a major example of that. It is amazing to me how this team seems to be improving despite losing players due to injury or trades. I would say that it says something good about the job Flores and the coaching staff is doing. Some credit needs to be given for that. Okay, and so here's my response. That's absolutely correct about the draft, and so we shall see how it goes. As for the improvement in the team, I believe that it is far more to do with the players coming together and playing for their jobs and their careers. They may also be pushing to get wins to protest the tank. After all, there were rumors that the team would protest if they traded Larry Tunsil, and then nothing seemingly materialized. Albeit speculation, perhaps this is their way of doing just that. Of course, though, the coaching staff in place now does deserve credit for developing some of the new young guys that are here, as well as some of the few that were remnants of the old regime. They get partial credit for players like Gesicki, but we can't forget he was a Gase pick and started his development. Gase and his staff are largely responsible for why he is far better at blocking than when he first came into the league. They already knew what he was as a pass catcher, but needed to round out his skill set. They also needed help in the blocking schemes last year due to injuries. I have always agreed that the resumes these coaches have are good. I acknowledge that individual pieces of this staff could be wonderful in different circumstances. My issues, of course, start with Stephen Ross and extend through the power structure because of the path they have consciously chosen to take this team down, because I feel like it is going to set us back a decade or longer. Unfortunately, at this point, all we really have is to wait and see how things play out. We won't know until a couple more years from now, at least. Either there will be significant evidence that this team is on the upswing and Flores' job will remain safe and they will continue to prove it. The goal, as per Stephen Ross, or obviously it could be a massive failure. But the goal, as per Stephen Ross himself, is to have maintained success, right? Steady success. And of course, that's what we all want as fans. I agree with that, but in his tenure as majority owner, coaches have lasted on average 3.5 years before being fired. In fact, the 3.5 year mark seems to be the magic number for triggering Ross's impatience. That suggests that as he continues to age, his patience will grow thinner. That suggests that if in 3 years, or perhaps halfway through year 4, things haven't improved enough to show we can make perennial appearances to the playoffs, then his job could be forfeit. That is a near impossible task, just simply from the perspective that you would need a minimum of 5 years to have enough data to support a conclusion one way or the other. If any number of things go wrong or setbacks occur, then the odds continue to diminish. Again, my fear is that Stephen Ross has set us back a decade or more. Only time will tell at this point. Phins up. So, look, at the end of the day, Dolphins fans, all of us, we just want what's best for the team. Obviously, you guys know that I completely disagree with the 0-16ers. I completely disagree with the approach of tanking and so on and so forth. But what we all want is for this team to, rise back to prominence. And look, I said at the very beginning, I've told you guys, I've been honest and transparent with you. I don't like the way that they handled the situation with Kenny Stills. I'm not going to forget about that. So I don't like, as I said, Brian Flores lost a lot of respect from me because of that. That is a major thing. And, So that is what it is. And Stephen Ross lost a lot of respect for me when he decided to support and have a fundraiser for Donald Trump. So, there's that. But I did also say, putting all that aside, just looking at football, I mean, obviously you guys know that I disagree with the tanking perspective, and I disagree with their football decisions in large part up to this point. There have been some minor good things, right? So again, extending Xavier Howard. I think, overall the vast majority of their transactions and moves were stupid and foolish and are going to come back to bite them. But, extending Xavier Howard I thought was good, right? And yes, they've had a ton of misses so far with some guys that they've brought in, like Robert Kimdichie, who they just released recently, or apparently or seemingly to this point Josh Rosen are some of the bigger ones. But tons of guys, even like I've said before, Jaron Elliott, the sack star, the leading sack artist from the AAF, or all of the guys that they brought in from the AAF. They've had tons and tons of just misses. But to their credit, they also have some potential, good pickups. We don't know yet because there hasn't been enough time, right? Like Preston Williams, there hasn't been enough time. He's an undrafted free agent, right? He's a rookie. And now, unfortunately, he's got the injury, which is a significant one, right? But, we also have to be able to evaluate his first, or the drafts that they have, right? And so I don't agree with how they handled the first draft. So far, it looks like their first draft is, we'll see. I mean, again, it's nowhere near enough time. But they do deserve some credit for some stuff. But again, in other situations, like I mentioned, like Mike Gesicki, we have to give credit for Gase. Like, we can't give Brian Flores credit for Mike Gesicki, only. That's ridiculous. Right? Because a bunch of people now are saying, oh, look at Mike Gesicki and blah, 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 whatever. And then people will but they'll go and be like, yeah, but he's using him different than Gase. Yes, but that's in part for a couple reasons. First of all, again, we had massive injuries, so they did need him to actually block a bunch last year, but they also needed to improve his skill set in that way and round him out, which was super important, which they did. But also, they did have more experienced guys. He was a rookie, right? They did have more experienced guys in there, like Nick O'Leary and I forgot who else they had. They had one or two other guys too. But anyway, I mean, they tried Julius Thomas. That didn't work out, obviously. But anyway, so, they had some other guys. He was young. It takes some time, especially it's a hard position for tight ends. But he had some flashes early on, but he got a lot of improvement in his blocking. And so they drafted him. They knew what he was as a pass catcher. And, so they get the credit for picking him and then developing him up until the point that they were no longer his coaches. And now this coaching staff does deserve credit for some of that. But also, I think that, again, a lot of the decisions that they have made, even in game day on the field, are right in line with the overall narrative of us trying to ensure that we have a tank of a season. Now, just because we're winning doesn't mean we're not tanking still, right? Because the whole idea is to go get a quarterback. Right? Now, one of the key components to a tank is absolutely there no matter what, whether we win or we lose, right? And that is the fact that we jettisoned all of our talent and leadership and proven production, blah, 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 right? And, we cleared house. We completely cleared house, right? And then we got a bunch of draft picks. That it is... And then, of course, by doing so, we certainly help to ensure the, 7 losses that we have up to this point, right? And we're probably going to lose a few more. I find it pretty inconceivable at this point that we'll have a winning season. I still don't think we'll end up getting to 6 wins even, but I do think it is possible we could, squeak out a few more. But, they do need to be held into account for that as well, right? And just because they say that they're not tanking and that they're trying to win every game, even though the clear narrative for this entire season has been tank, and look, we can't separate people, right? It's not just the front office tanking by design and the coaching staff is not part of it. No, they are. That's ridiculous, because think about that. If Brian Flores really didn't want to, he would have done what Gase did and said, no, I'm not going to tank. So at a bare minimum, people who disagree with me have to acknowledge the fact that he agreed to it. So even if he's not consciously calling the plays like the third, or, if he's not actively calling the plays, of course Patrick Graham is, but he's still on the headset for that 3rd and 20 against the Steelers, right? He was still there for that call, that 2-point conversion call, and, having Kenyon Drake in there, even though he didn't practice the play at all, right? Like all these things. He's the one that controls the timeouts and has just mysteriously used them, right? So all of these things fall in line with the narrative of the tanking. Now again, the players are playing their ass off, and of course they have now gotten time to learn each other. Give credit though to the coaching staff, because they have made us one of the least penalized teams in the league, which is definitely a massive credit to them. So they get some credit, but they don't get credit yet for things that they have not accomplished. Okay, so they have not yet made this team into a perennial playoff contender. Okay, and the data that we have currently suggests that we are still multiple years away from that point. Now again, and this is, to wrap this up, my fear is that this is going to ultimately end up backfiring. I mean, we still have to, there's still the massive mystery about what's going to happen after the 2020 season. If the NFLPA and the NFL can find a way to, work things out, I think that there is a good chance that they will, and we will be able to have football in 2021. The NFL is not going to want to lose out on that and the massive amounts of money that come with that, right? So I do think that they will come to some sort of agreement, one way or the other, but there is that chance. But even beyond that, right? Again, Stephen Ross is how old? And he I think we can all agree that he has failed to at least live up to the winning tradition of this franchise. Everybody's upset about that for, his time. The past couple decades, we've been stuck in mediocrity. And, now I don't think we're going to even make it into the mediocre range, which would be, between 6-10 and 10-6 is the average, win to loss ratio. I think we're going to have less than 6 wins. But even if we made it there, right, it's still, that would still barely then be on par with Stephen Ross's tenure. And he has a propensity to fire coaches after 3.5 years. 3.5 years on average. If you look at all the coaches that have been here since Stephen Ross's time, and he's getting older. He's impatient. He demanded that Gase do it. He said no, so he fired him, right? Like, there's so, and then you got to hit on all of your picks, right? You got to make sure that you prioritize, right? And then, so what if they do end up, winning a few more games, right? And honestly, that was one of the, I guess fears of Ryan Fitzpatrick, is he might win you enough games to lose that number 1 pick, blah, 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 blah. Personally, I like that. I like winning games. But, what if this organization does, what if in Ross's craven desperation, he does then trade away a significant portion of, including multiple first-round picks, just to go up and try and get, let's say, Tua, okay? And what if we give away, let's say he trades away all 3 of our first-round picks, because what if, like I said, right now, we currently have the 4th, the 22nd, and the 26th, as it stands today. If the season was to end today, those would be the picks that we have, the 4th, the 22nd, and the 26th. But the Dolphins look like we're going to win possibly a couple more games. Maybe even a few more games at this point. Pittsburgh could definitely win a few more of their games. Houston, we definitely expect to keep winning, and we definitely expect them to make it into the playoffs. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he trades away, that it calculates out, because each pick is worth a certain amount, because we could even fall out of the top 5, maybe in the back end of the top 10, maybe even out of the top 10, depending on how many games we win. And so it's not out of, so what if that happens and then we trade up, let's say we trade up with Cincinnati to get the number 1 pick, and let's say we give them, all 3 of our first round picks. Let's say that's what it would take to entice them. And we've seen what Stephen Ross does. We know he wants a quarterback, and he wants one this year, right? He wanted one last year. He probably wanted one. I'm pretty sure he wanted one the year before that as well. Okay. And I think that probably has a lot to do with, frankly, why he fired Gase as well, because he was done with Tannehill, even though there was no legitimate reason to be done with Tannehill, and he wanted him to. Now, again, I do think that this organization, even after they drafted Tannehill the year after, should have taken a quarterback again. Take one every year in the 3rd round or later, depending on your need. And that is a failing of. They did take Brandon Doughty. They took 1 quarterback, but they should have been better at that. So they didn't completely fail, but they should have been better at that. But look, this regime didn't take a quarterback at all in the draft this year. Instead, they traded a 2nd round pick and a 5th round from next year to get Josh Rosen, who is looking more and more every day, every week, like that's going to be a failure of this team. It's going to end up being a waste. We still have to see what we do with the 5th round pick. Or no, I'm sorry, we gave away a 5th round pick. My fault. We gave away a 2nd and a 5th from next year. So looks like those picks could potentially just be wasted, right? Although we could end up getting that 5th round pick back if, that last pick, that 6th round pick from Arizona in the Kenyon Drake trade ends up becoming a 5th, whatever. Right? But so we didn't take a quarterback this year, and we know that, it's virtually a guarantee they're going to take one next year, right? So what if they do that? And what if they trade away all 3 of our 1st round picks? Cincy might be, down for that. Or maybe not Cincy, maybe Washington or maybe the Jets if they're high enough at that point, right? Because they're probably going to be, with Sam Darnold, and they might not, necessarily want to take a quarterback that high, but all 3 of our 1st round picks could be what it takes to leverage that kind of trade, to trade up into the top 3 again, right? Especially if, again, 2 of those picks are in the 20s and one of them is at the back end of the top 10 or out of the top 10. So, we still have, a ways to go. I do think it's actually relatively unlikely at this point that we get the number 1 pick. And at this point, I actually do think we are going to win a couple more games. Like I said, the Cincy game, the Cleveland game, the Jets game, the Giants game, all winnable games. And these players are playing their asses off, man. Definitely. So, who knows? And again, any given Sunday, right? Last week, we were fortunate in the fact that T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell were out. Desir, their top corner was out. Jacoby Brissett was out. So, and then what if they get Tua, though? What if they go up and they get Tua? Right? And what if they give away all those picks so they're not able to adequately fix the offensive line? And then what if they bank on high overpriced free agent acquisitions, if there are even any that are, really worth it? And I'm sure there's probably 1 or 2, right? If we can entice them to come to Miami, right? They're going to bet on that being the remedy. And then what if it's not? And then what if Tua Tagovailoa gets injured and has, season-ending. He's had ankle problems, a season-ending ankle injury, because he gets excessively beat up in his rookie season when being thrust into the fire, right? And then what if they take a quarterback high in the 2021 draft? Because they're not sure then about Tua. Because then maybe, you know, his whatever, right? Maybe that injury scares them, then they take another quarterback high. So, I mean, again, a lot of speculation, and that's why, for me, for the rest of the season, I have those tenets that I'm looking for, and it's a waiting game. It's a waiting game. And again, at the end of the day, as Dolphin fans, we all just want to see what's best for this team, and I have massive, massive reservations about it. There is red flag after red flag. There are, you know, screaming signals. Are there some, you know, surprise, wonderful things? Yes. And does this coaching staff deserve some credit for some good things? Yes. Preston Williams. Yes. Vince Beagle. Yes. Nick Needham seems to be coming along. Yes. Right. Whatever. Right. So they get and to continue developing Raekwon McMillan and Jerome Baker. But again, those are Gase picks. Right? So Gase is responsible for bringing those guys in and starting their development. But this regime gets credit for continuing their development. Now let's see how the rest of the season goes. Let's see if we get more wins, blah, blah, blah. Let's see where we end up, what our draft positioning is going into this next draft. And then let's see what ends up happening in the next draft. I mean, it's going to be very telling. Like I said, at this point, we don't have a choice, right? It is what it is. And they're going to have at least the next, I'd say, 2 years. For sure, I would say the next 2 years, Brian Flores and this coaching staff will have control of this team, right? And Chris Greer and Marvin Allen and Reggie McKenzie, blah, 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 right? And you know, somewhere around that 3.5 year mark, we should know pretty clearly whether or not this regime is even going to last long enough to be able to see the fruits of their supposed labor, right? Of their labor, to see if they're going to be able to bring this to fruition. We're going to see if they can prioritize and draft correctly. We're going to see if there are setbacks and how Stephen Ross handles that and if he gets impatient, right? So again, far too much risk for my liking, and especially when then you see, you know, yes, so Adam Gase, the coach from the past few years, is struggling. I know I said I was going to end this a few minutes ago, but you guys know me. So I know Adam Gase is struggling for sure. But again, a lot of that is not Adam Gase's fault. The internal organizational conflicts, not his fault. There before he got there, right? Things like Jamal Adams's problems with the organization. That was pre-Gase, right? It predated Gase. He was upset with the organization for a while now, has been for a while now, right? The acquisitions of CJ Mosley and Le'Veon Bell those aren't his guys. He hasn't had time to instill his culture and to get his guys, right? And we do know that he does not like to spend big in free agency. That's not what he does. But that aside, when you look at all, you know, again, not all the players, but a lot of the players that we got rid of. I mean, look at Tannehill. I told y'all he was going to end up being the starting quarterback of the Titans at some point. I told you he was going to take over that job. And I told you he was going to perform. Out of the 4 games that he's played, he's 3-1. He's gotten them to 500. I think they're 5-5 now on the season, or whatever. I think it's 5-5. And in 4 of those games, or I mean 3 of those 4 games, he led a comeback at the end of the game to win it. Ryan Tannehill put that game on his shoulders, put those games on his shoulders, and elevated that team. Something that they said he could never do. But see, and that's the thing, is every time there was a criticism about something Tannehill couldn't do, he would come out and prove. People, you know, a few years ago, people were like, oh, he couldn't hit the deep ball. But he's super accurate. And when he has time, he proves that. And he's beasting for them. Kenyon Drake, when he left here, beasting for the Cardinals, right? His first game, he got 110 rushing yards, 52 receiving yards, a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion. And by the way, that game, the last one that the Titans played that they won against the Kansas City Chiefs, not only did they upset him, but Tannehill did take that game over. He had, if you look at his stat line, it wouldn't blow you away by any means. Certainly not like Patrick Mahomes' stat line. Of course, Patrick Mahomes is a freak of nature. He is a unique specimen. Okay, the things he can do are almost nobody else can do. Is Ryan Tannehill that? No, of course not. But he is without question an above average quarterback. And at the end of the day, he did what he needed to do to elevate his team. I mean, the 2-point conversion. Did you see how, I mean, if you watched it, he muscled his way in. He took on a defender and muscled his way in. He orchestrated beautiful drives. In his opportunities, he maximized. And he had a ground game that could support him and an offensive line as well, right? And he showed what he can do. Minkah Fitzpatrick, balling for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is a major reason why they are making a comeback and going on a streak right now. Especially considering the fact that Mason Rudolph has shown that he's struggling and that offense is struggling. That defense is what is winning them games. And this last one that the Steelers played, Minkah won that game for them. 7 of their points came off of his scoop and score. He got the game-sealing interception at the very end. He has 5 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, and 2 touchdowns now with the Pittsburgh Steelers, making a strong case for not just a Pro Bowl, but Defensive Player of the Year honors. And again, Gase pick. And he had a really, really good rookie season with the Dolphins. Tannehill was not a Gase pick, but Gase was the first coach that really believed in Tannehill and committed to him. Kenyon Drake, a Gase pick. Who else? Laramie Tunsil, a Gase pick, who has fortified that left tackle spot for the Texans and who is helping them win games. They're 6-3. He's helping them, as is Kenny Stills, helping them to, win their division and to get to the playoffs. Kenny Stills, again, not a Gase pick, but a Gase guy for sure. It was him that chose to extend Kenny Stills, to pay Kenny Stills, because he's like, you know what? You're a free agent that was brought in. You're in-house now, and you've proven yourself to us. We're going to pay you because you're our guy now. Right? So, we'll see, man. We'll see. It's super disappointing because we didn't need to be here right now. None of this was necessary, but this is proof, right? This year is proof of Stephen Ross's impatience, right? It wasn't enough, and a lot of the fans agree, it wasn't enough for him that he took a perpetually average team with a quarterback he apparently didn't like very much and took him to the playoffs after going 10-6 in the first season. And then after losing his quarterback, and not having him for year 2, losing your starting middle linebacker, Raekwon McMillan, in preseason, we lost Cordray Tankersley. Tony Lippett. We lost early, and then he was never right after his Achilles tear. We lost some major players early in the preseason and before the season, right? And then again, hurricane, displacement, loss of bye, traveled more in the first few weeks than most teams traveled the entire season. Had an AWOL linebacker, an offensive line coach that had to be fired because he got caught snorting coke in the team facility, right? Because a prostitute, a sex worker, she was an escort, I think. She was an escort. And she, outed him, right? So everything that could happen, including losing your starting, quarterback for the season, and then having to rely on Jay Cutler, which again, I didn't like that, but you know, there wasn't really much choice at that point, and they were familiar with each other. And he did have some good games, right? But so everything that could happen had a setback, and then last year was just injuries. If they were given one more year, and if he was just not impatient, but that proves, again, 3 years or so, and Stephen Ross is done. So, again, I feel, but you know, Stephen Ross, you know, again, all of his decisions have kept us in perpetual mediocrity up to this point. But now, you know, I mean, he's definitely done something unprecedented for this team and for the NFL. We've never seen the NFL, from my estimation, from the articles I've read, the data I've seen, the people I've heard, people I've talked to, you know, just other fans, whatever, like, because I don't know anybody important, but, you know, other fans. The NFL's never seen this. And the closest I can see is the Browns, and they're 3-6 right now, I think, right? And they're struggling immensely. They barely squeaked out a win against the Bills. Barely. And that was Baker Mayfield rising to the occasion, sure, you know, and helping to lead his team, but he's struggling. Their whole team is struggling, but they're loaded with talent. They're loaded with first-round picks and so on and so forth, right? So, anyway, this went way longer than I wanted it to, but it was I thought it was a really super important conversation to be had. But so I'm gonna end it there. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and my perspective. I hope, you know, look, again, we're all Dolphins fans. We want what's best for this team, and I hope we can get there. I don't think that we're on the right path personally. But look, at the end of the day, you know, as fans, we are going to have to, you know, come together and have some sort of solidarity and you know, because I think at the end of the day, it's gonna require the fans, you know, to push for some change in this organization. I really just don't think that Stephen Ross is the one that's going to be that's going to lead us back to the promised land, whatever. And you know, I just don't think he's going to go without, you know, significant pressure. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy my videos and my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts for my videos. Make sure you share my channel and my videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. See y'all soon. Fins up.